Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. In the quiet suburbs of Colorado, a tyrannical HOA president named Karen reigns supreme until a fed-up neighbor fights back. What starts as a war over petty fines spirals into a high-stakes legal battle, explosive parties, and one woman's stunning downfall. This isn't just a feud, it's war. The gavel hit the desk, and just like that, we'd won. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs as the judge ruled in our favor, declaring the HOA fines invalid and Karen Dalt, our ever-smug, ever-persistent neighborhood dictator, guilty of overstepping her authority. I sat there, hands clenched in my lap, watching her face twist as the ruling came down. You could practically hear her teeth grind. If looks could kill, I'd be on a morgue slab right now. But I wasn't. I was a free man, free of her fines, her threats, her micromanaging letters taped to my mailbox like she was running a military installation instead of a gated community in suburban Colorado. The judge didn't stop there. Given the extent of her harassment, he issued a 30-yard restraining order. Karen was legally barred from approaching our property line. A huge win, though I knew it wouldn't be the end. Not with her. People like Karen don't take losses. They plot revenge, and if the rigid twitch in her eye as she stormed out of the courtroom was any indication, I had just stepped on the tail of a very poisonous snake. We got home that evening and popped a bottle of non-alcoholic cider with Ben. He was ecstatic, mostly because he didn't really understand the legal stuff. He just knew Karen wasn't allowed to yell at me anymore. My wife, Mary, kissed me on the cheek, proud but cautious. She knew the war wasn't over. We'd won a battle. Karen had power, connections, and a pathological need to feel in control. She wouldn't let go of her iron grip on the HOA without a tantrum fit for a toddler on meth. The next few weeks were quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that makes your skin itch. No letters, no friendly reminders, no sudden HOA notices. Instead, the harassment came through surrogates. One morning, I found a note tucked into our mailbox, unsigned, about unapproved play equipment in our yard. It had the smug, passive-aggressive cadence of a Karen classic, but it came through another board member. Another day, a different neighbor passed on a message from the board about our landscaping schedule being non-compliant, despite it being professionally maintained and fully within code. Mary, being the seasoned civil litigator she is, kept records of everything. Every note, every voicemail, every secondhand message delivered like some kindergarten tattletale relay. And through it all, Karen never showed her face. She stayed just far enough back to avoid breaking the court order, but close enough to let her venom drip through others. But we didn't react. We documented. We waited. Then came the day Ben had been talking about for months, his 10th birthday. The kid had been planning it like it was the Met Gala, bounce house, inflatable water slide, a Jurassic Park-themed cake, and a DJ who mostly just knew how to play clean pop hits and point at children with over-the-top enthusiasm. We cleared everything with the county, sent neighbor notifications, and double-checked noise ordinances. The party would be in broad daylight, on our private lawn, wrapped up well before sundown. It was legal, respectful, and carefully prepared. Mary even double-checked the HOA charter. Yes, the same one we technically weren't even subject to anymore, thanks to the court ruling. Nowhere, not in one single paragraph, did it forbid birthday parties. We went door to door a week in advance to make sure everyone nearby was comfortable with the timing. Every single one of them smiled and said, "Sounds fun. Let us know if you need chairs." Everyone but Karen. She didn't answer the door when we stopped by. Her blinds twitched, though. We saw her silhouette in the window, stiff and watching. On the morning of the party, I woke early, filled with that anxious dad energy. By 10, the backyard was buzzing. Balloons everywhere, kids bouncing like hyperactive kangaroos, neighbors mingling and sipping lemonade. Ben beamed like the sun itself. Even Mary loosened up and laughed with one of the other moms as they set up the snacks. Rideshare vans dropped off classmates. A pizza truck rolled up. Everything was running smoother than I could have hoped for. Then I noticed Karen. She was standing on the sidewalk across the cul-de-sac. Not on her lawn, on public space, but close. Too close. Arms crossed, notebook in hand, staring. I locked eyes with her, and she didn't even blink, just scribbled something down and walked away. Mary caught my arm. Did she cross the line? Not technically, I muttered, but she's circling. Looking for an angle. We returned to the party, determined not to let her ruin the day. but in the pit of my stomach, I knew she wasn't done. Less than 30 minutes later, I saw it. A police cruiser pulling into the neighborhood. Of course. I wasn't surprised, not even a little. I watched as the black and white SUV turned down our street, and sure enough, there she was again, now walking briskly toward the officer with righteous indignation painted all over her face. I saw her pointing at our house, flailing her arms like she was reporting a drug lab instead of a SpongeBob piñata. The party music dropped low as everyone noticed the flashing lights. I exhaled slowly. Showtime, I muttered to myself and stepped off the porch. The officer stepped out of the vehicle and I immediately smiled. It was Officer Phelps, a guy I'd known since we moved in, who had seen firsthand how deep the Karen crazy well ran. We'd shared more than one backyard beer and HOA horror story over the years. He tipped his cap, looked at the crowd of kids, then at Karen, then back at me. "Birthday?" he asked, half grinning. "Yup," I nodded. 10 years old. No fireworks, no open flame, no felony-level activity. Just a T-Rex cake and some noise-canceling earbuds for parents. He chuckled. "Mind if I take a look?" "Be my guest." He strolled through the yard, waved to the kids, checked the volume on the speakers with a handheld meter, and nodded in approval. I saw Karen watching from the sidewalk, fuming as her grand performance unraveled. When Phelps returned, he pulled out a folded paper from his jacket pocket. My jaw tightened. "I believe you've seen this before," he said, stepping toward the sidewalk where Karen stood. "Court issued. States very clearly you're not to approach within 30 yards of the Miller's property." Karen's face went pale. Her mouth opened, but no words came. "Ma'am," Phelps said flatly, "you're pushing that line real close." "I have a duty," she snapped. "As HOA president, I have a legal obligation to protect the integrity of this community." "You also have a legal obligation to obey a judge's order," he replied. "This party's not illegal. And neither are inflatable dinosaurs." Karen took a step back. Then another. Her fists clenched, her face twitching with frustration. "This isn't over," she hissed. "Actually," I said, folding my arms, "I think it might be." We went back to the party, for now. Ben was up at 6 in the morning, bouncing around the kitchen like he'd mainlined a bag of Skittles. He was wearing a party hat over his bed head, still in pajamas, already trying to test the bounce house with no shoes on. Mary was 2 cups of coffee deep and had entered logistical command mode. I just smiled, poured myself another mug, and tried to stay out of the way. Today was supposed to be easy. Controlled chaos, sure, but the good kind. Balloons, sugar, laughter, not legal motions and restraining orders. By 9, the backyard was a full-blown birthday battleground. The bounce house was inflated, the water slide humming. Streamers lined the fence. Parents began arriving with their kids, bringing snacks, gifts, and folding chairs. Music played from our Bluetooth speakers, not too loud, nothing obnoxious. A local bakery delivered the dinosaur-shaped cake on time. Even the pizza guy showed up early, a miracle in and of itself. Mary was in her element, greeting people, double-checking coolers, laughing with our neighbors. Rachel, from 2 doors down, brought her twin boys and a bottle of wine for later. The Ramos family helped set up tables. Every guest we'd invited came, and a few even brought extra siblings along. Everyone knew the deal. No drinking, no fireworks, no screaming past dusk. I'd even gone as far as printing out a copy of the county noise ordinance and taping it near the patio, just in case anyone tried anything. But the real reassurance came when Raymond Jarvis stepped into the backyard. He was a retired judge and our next-door neighbor. He wore a baseball cap that read "Due Process" and carried himself like he was still behind the bench. I watched as he surveyed the setup, arms crossed, expression neutral. Then he gave me a nod. "Perfectly legal," he muttered. "Sound levels within tolerance. Equipment is rented and insured. And that DJ, surprisingly tasteful." "Thank you, Your Honor," I said with a mock bow. "Just Jarvis today," he grinned. "I'm off duty." At one point, I noticed Karen standing in her driveway across the cul-de-sac watching. Her arms were crossed, that same damn notebook in hand. Her mouth moved like she was narrating to herself, or maybe muttering spells. Either way, she stood there motionless for 20 minutes. I thought she'd lose interest. She didn't. At 10:45, I saw her raise her phone and take a photo. Then another. Then she disappeared into her house. That's when I felt the tension creep in. I knew that look. She wasn't watching anymore. She was calculating. Around 11:15, a teenager in a black hoodie came walking down the street, phone in hand, looking out of place. He stopped near our mailbox, pointed his phone at the yard, then left. I didn't recognize him. One of the parents said she'd seen him around the HOA office on weekends, probably a kid Karen paid to document violations. I made a mental note, walked inside, and saved the security cam footage. About 20 minutes later, Karen reemerged, this time not from her house, but from the side gate between her yard and the adjacent walkway. She wasn't technically on our property, but she was close. Too close, hovering at the 30-yard boundary. I measured it once when the restraining order was issued. She was skirting the edge like a drunk playing hopscotch on a minefield. "Don't say anything," Mary whispered, appearing at my side. "I'm not," I said. "But she's pushing it. She's baiting you. We've got cameras. Let her hang herself." I took a breath and went back to refilling the drink cooler. Karen stayed at that spot for the next half hour, staring. Just standing there, arms folded, lips tight. A few of the parents noticed. Someone asked if we wanted her to leave. I told them it was under control. Then a minivan drove up our street and parked across from our house. A police cruiser followed 2 minutes later. And there it was. Officer Phelps again, stepping out of his car looking mildly annoyed, like someone had just called 911 over an overcooked steak. Karen met him at the curb, waving her papers like she was landing a plane. I stayed by the side gate and watched. She was louder this time. I could hear snatches of her voice. Community bylaw, unauthorized gathering, public safety. She looked like she was trying to build a legal case in real time using fragments from Wikipedia and her own delusions. Phelps let her talk, nodding occasionally. Then he looked up at the house, at the kids running around in dinosaur hats, and sighed. He waved me over. "Mr. Miller," he said, "we meet again." "Officer," I said. "Let me guess. Someone reported a rogue birthday?" Claims were made about unauthorized use of shared space, unregistered equipment, and noise violations, he said. Deadpan. Of course, I had a feeling. He glanced back at Karen. She was on the phone now, pacing, gesturing wildly. I walked him through the setup again, showed him the documents, the insurance, the permits, the taped ordinance. He nodded, took a quick sound reading. 71 decibels. "You're good," he said. "Cleaner than most block parties I see. Honestly, looks fun. You got cake left?" Karen noticed we were talking and stormed back over. "Officer, you're not taking this seriously enough. I've documented at least 6 violations of the HOA charter. This party is not under HOA jurisdiction," Phelps said calmly. Karen blinked. "What?" "I've seen the court ruling. The Millers' property is exempt from HOA enforcement following the civil judgment 3 months ago. That includes event restrictions." Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, sputtering like a car with a busted carburetor. I have internal HOA policy documents." "That don't apply to them," Phelps said. Karen turned bright red. "They're endangering children." "By feeding them cake?" "They're flaunting the rules." "They're obeying the law." Karen's voice pitched up several octaves. "Then I'll call the sheriff. I'll call code enforcement. I'll call child services." "And they'll all get the same answer," Phelps said. "You're trespassing near a property you're under court order to stay away from. And right now, you're about 31 yards away." Her face fell. She'd been so focused on shutting us down, she forgot how close she'd come to stepping over the line, literally. "I'm letting it slide for now," he said. "But next time, I won't." Karen didn't reply. She just turned and walked away, shaking. Back inside the yard, the party was still going strong. Kids splashed in the inflatable pool. A parent organized a game of tag, and the DJ was doing the chicken dance. But I noticed it, the tension. A few guests had seen the patrol car. One dad asked if everything was okay. I said yes, mostly, but I knew it wasn't over. Not with Karen. I should have known she wouldn't leave it alone. For the next hour, Karen was quiet, suspiciously so. The party carried on with the hum of childhood chaos. Balloons floated overhead, music thumped gently from the speakers, and kids tore across the yard with cake-fueled abandon. I let myself think, just for a moment, that maybe Officer Phelps's warning had done the trick. Then I saw her again. She stood just off to the side of her yard, in the shade of a pine tree, pacing like a caged animal. She was on her phone, again, but this time her gestures were more frantic, sharp. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I saw the way she stabbed her finger toward our house, the jerk of her neck, the clench in her jaw. I looked over at Mary, who was helping a group of kids with popsicle sticks and glue. She caught my glance and raised an eyebrow. I nodded toward Karen's direction. Mary squinted, frowned, and mouthed, "Still." That's when Karen made her move. She stormed down her driveway, crossed the street, and stepped directly onto the public sidewalk that ran parallel to our fence line, still technically not violating the restraining order, but hovering right on the edge. Close enough to cause trouble. Too close. "Afternoon," I said as calmly as I could, stepping to the side gate. She ignored me. Instead, she turned to the group of kids playing near the edge of the yard. "This is an unauthorized gathering," she snapped. "You shouldn't be here. It's against community safety policy." A couple of the kids froze. One little girl looked on the verge of tears. That's when Raymond, Judge Jarvis, stepped in. The man had been lounging on a deck chair with a lemonade in hand. Now he stood up like he was donning his robe again. "Ma'am," he called out, "step away from the children." Karen blinked. "Excuse me? You're on the border of violating a court-issued restraining order, and now you're harassing minors at a private event. I suggest you leave." Karen took a step forward instead. "I am the president of this HOA," she spat, "and I will not be bullied by criminals who think they're above the rules." That's when she made her fatal mistake. She kicked the inflatable T-Rex with her heel hard, like she was trying to pop it on purpose. The plastic sagged slightly but didn't burst. The kids shrieked, backing away. One boy tripped and fell onto the grass. Then she turned and saw the cake table. I saw it in her eyes. Something snapped. She stormed over, grabbed the tray holding the birthday cake, and flung it sideways onto the grass. It landed with a soft splat, icing everywhere. The dinosaur's head was completely decapitated. Time stopped for a second. Then the parents started yelling. "What the hell are you doing?" "Get away from the kids." Someone grabbed their phone. Someone else pulled their child back. Cameras went up, recording in every direction. I stood frozen, half in disbelief, half in fury. Karen spun around and kicked the small, portable air pump connected to the bounce house. The unit cracked, wheezed, and shut off. The bounce house began deflating with a sad whine. Kids inside screamed and scrambled out, stumbling over collapsing vinyl. That was enough. I pulled out my phone and hit speed dial for Phelps. "Andrew," he answered, already suspicious. "She just kicked the bounce house air pump, destroyed the cake, and is screaming at children. You might want to get back here." "I'm on my way." I turned to Mary, who had already grabbed the portable file folder we kept on hand since the last legal round. Everything was in there. Court orders, neighborhood regulations, property records, and now another set of videos taken by at least 6 different parents. One of them, Rachel, was standing beside me with her phone already uploading the footage to the cloud. Karen hadn't stopped. She was now ranting to no one in particular. "This is illegal. You're corrupt. You're all part of some conspiracy against order and decency. These are children. You're endangering children." Jarvis moved toward her, slowly, deliberately. "Karen, leave now, before you're arrested." "You don't tell me what to do." "No," he said, "but the police do." That's when Officer Phelps pulled up again, this time with another cruiser behind him. 2 officers stepped out. Karen froze, eyes wide. Phelps approached calmly, like he'd just walked into a domestic zoo exhibit. "Ma'am," he said, "I warned you earlier." "They're breaking the rules," she screeched. "I have the authority." He held up a hand. "You're violating a court-issued restraining order. You destroyed property. You acted aggressively toward children. Multiple witnesses, video evidence. Please turn around and place your hands behind your back." She didn't move. "Karen," I said, voice low, "you've lost. Walk away with a shred of dignity." Instead, she lunged toward the table again, grabbing a decorative centerpiece and hurling it across the yard. That was it. Phelps and the second officer moved in fast. She struggled, shrieked, called them names I hadn't heard since Navy boot camp, but she was cuffed and loaded into the back of the cruiser within minutes. The yard was silent. Kids huddled near their parents. Mary checked on Ben, who looked stunned but okay. His best friend handed him a backup cupcake from the food table, untouched. "I'm sorry, buddy," I said, kneeling down. Ben looked at the wreckage, then at the cupcake. "Ah, that lady's crazy," he said. "She won't be back, I promised." I didn't say it lightly. We spent the next few hours salvaging what was left of the party. The bounce house had deflated into a sad pile of vinyl near the back fence, and the cake was a total loss. Dinosaur guts scattered across the lawn. But the kids, to their credit, bounced back. We cut open the emergency stash of cupcakes, and Mary organized a last-minute scavenger hunt using candy bags and leftover party favors. Parents stayed. Nobody left early. If anything, Karen's meltdown turned into the kind of shared trauma that builds neighborhood solidarity. Still, beneath the smiles and polite chuckles, everyone was shaken. Phelps returned an hour later, off duty, but still in uniform. He walked into the backyard with a clipboard and a tired expression. "I'm filing my report tonight," he said. "Just wanted to confirm a few things before it goes into the system." We brought him inside, set him up at the kitchen table, and handed over a flash drive full of video clips from at least 7 different cell phones. Mary had already printed screenshots of the restraining order and highlighted the relevant sections. Phelps reviewed everything methodically, occasionally letting out a quiet whistle when one video showed Karen booting the air pump like she was trying out for a soccer team. "She really did herself in," he muttered. "She went after the cake first," I said. "That's when I knew she'd cracked," he nodded. "There's enough here for criminal charges, multiple counts, violation of a court order, vandalism, public disturbance, aggressive conduct in front of minors. And we'd like to add formal charges," Mary said, sliding a document across the table. "This is our affidavit. Andrew and I are filing for a civil harassment injunction and requesting full restitution." Phelps took it, glanced through, and smiled grimly. "This is airtight." He left around dusk. We locked the doors, shut the blinds, and put Ben to bed early. He didn't cry, but he didn't smile much either. He hugged his stuffed stegosaurus and asked if Karen would come back. I told him no. This time, I meant it. The next morning, my phone buzzed at 7 a.m. sharp. It was Raymond. "She's out on bail," he said flatly. "Already. You've got to be kidding me. She spent the night in county lockup. Judge Hastings released her with conditions, but she's already called an emergency HOA board meeting." Of course she has. Mary and I spent the morning drafting a formal complaint to the HOA Oversight Office in Denver. We'd tried the polite route before. This time we were sending it with teeth. Video evidence, written statements from neighbors, the court order, and a request for full audit of the HOA board's authority structure. Around noon, we got a call from a journalist with the Denver Sentinel. Apparently, one of the party guests had posted a snippet of Karen's meltdown online. No kids shown, but plenty of footage of her trashing the party, like a malfunctioning Roomba. "You want to make a statement?" the reporter asked. "No," I said, "and not yet." But I sent him the court case number. Public record speaks for itself. By that afternoon, things got even more interesting. A uniformed code inspector showed up on our doorstep, not with a citation for once, but with a warning. "I've received 3 anonymous complaints about unlicensed structures on your property," he said, motioning to the remnants of the bounce house. "We rented it. It's already gone." "I figured as much," he said, holding up the clipboard. "These were clearly fishing expeditions, but I'm required to log the visit." Mary stepped outside with her lawyer voice activated. "Are the complaints traceable?" The inspector shrugged. "Technically, they're anonymous, but 3 came in within 20 minutes. Same phrasing. One even misspelled violation the same way. Karen. Again." By that evening, we got word from another neighbor, Steve, who lived 2 houses down, that Karen had started circulating a new petition among board members to remove us from the neighborhood for public indecency and disorderly conduct. She was trying to frame the party as a deliberate act of civil disobedience. Steve refused to sign, so did most others. That was when Raymond called again. "She's cooked," he said. "You won't believe what I just found." He forwarded us a scanned copy of a policy update Karen had circulated to the board a week prior to Ben's party. It claimed that unapproved gatherings of more than 10 individuals are prohibited without explicit written consent from the HOA. It had a signature line, but no signatures, no timestamps, no record of board approval. And according to the HOA's own bylaws, any such change would have required a 2/3 vote and 30-day notice. She forged it, Mary said, holding the document up to the light like a detective in a noir film. She literally made up the rule. "We need to add this to the complaint," I said. "And to the DA's office," Mary added. "Falsification of official HOA documentation. That's not civil. That's criminal." We spent the next 2 hours building the expanded case file, timeline of events, copy of the forged document, video of Karen referencing the policy to Officer Phelps. It was textbook fabrication. I sat back in my chair and rubbed my eyes. She really thought no one would check. She thought she was untouchable, Mary said. But now she's touched federal territory. Fraud, intimidation, misuse of authority. She's not just a nuisance anymore. No, she said. She's a felon waiting to be booked. The next morning started quiet. Too quiet. It was the kind of silence that didn't bring peace, but tension. Like something waiting just outside the edge of perception, crouched and coiled. Ben had gone off to school as usual, backpack a little heavier with leftover cupcakes he insisted on sharing with his classmates. Mary had a deposition scheduled downtown, so it was just me at home, trying to return to normal. I walked through the backyard, stepping over a deflated corner of the bounce house that the rental company would pick up later today. A few scattered balloons still clung to the bushes like battle-weary survivors. The broken cake platter lay near the fence, a casualty I hadn't bothered to clean yet. Part of me wanted to leave it there as evidence. Around 11, I sat on the porch with coffee and opened my laptop, thinking maybe I'd get some work done, anything to shift my brain away from Karen's face, her voice, her venom. But my inbox was a mess. Subject lines read like a horror anthology. Noise complaint follow-up, violation of community standards, urgent HOA matter. They were all forwarded messages, some from the HOA board members, others from neighbors. Apparently, Karen had wasted no time. She'd spent the previous evening emailing everyone on the HOA mailing list, accusing me and Mary of hosting an unauthorized, dangerous, and community-disruptive event that endangered minors and defied the peaceful spirit of residential living. She used words like reckless and contemptuous, and even quoted Bible verses, which, given her usual methods, landed somewhere between surreal and insulting. Worse, she included attachments, poorly cropped photos of kids running, the DJ at his table, even a blurry close-up of someone holding a slice of cake, all of it designed to make the party look like a cross between a rave and a riot. But the timestamps were off, the context missing, and to anyone with common sense, it just looked desperate. Still, it stung. I forwarded the emails to Mary and to Raymond, adding a note. She's ramping up the smear campaign. Looks like she's playing the long game. Raymond replied almost immediately. She's bluffing, but we'll need to be ready. I've spoken with 2 other board members. They're fed up. Something's moving. Moving. The word lingered with me as I stared at the email chain. Something was moving. But what? Karen had been publicly humiliated, arrested, and exposed. Yet here she was, still clawing at the walls, still grasping for control like a drowning woman reaching for someone else's neck. By early afternoon, Steve, the neighbor who had tipped us off about Karen's petition, knocked on my door. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept. "I thought you should see this," he said, handing me a flyer. It was printed on thick, glossy stock. At the top, in bold red letters, Emergency HOA Community Forum, a vote to restore order. Karen's name wasn't on it, but the tone. All hers. "Let me guess," I said. "She's pushing for this. She called an informal meeting with the board last night, tried to rally votes for your removal from the neighborhood. The board rejected it. So, now she's going to the residents directly." I flipped the flyer over. It listed time, date, and location. Next Wednesday at the community center. Public discussion. Vote on several items, including a disciplinary response to ongoing homeowner misconduct. "This isn't just about me," I muttered. Steve nodded. "Nope, she's trying to reclaim control. She thinks if she can turn a few more neighbors against you, she'll justify her behavior retroactively." I sighed. "You know this is insane, right? She's under investigation. There's footage. A restraining order. She assaulted a cake, for God's sake." "She's banking on people forgetting the details," Steve said, "or being too passive to challenge her." He paused. "She's betting on silence." That night, I met with Mary and Raymond over dinner. We sat at our kitchen table, the documents spread out like a war council. "She's trying to muddy the waters," Mary said, flipping through the printed emails. "Make it seem like this is all a gray area, that she and Andrew just had a misunderstanding, that the board is confused, that nothing's proven." Raymond leaned back, fingers steepled. "We need to get ahead of it. Before the meeting next week, we need to make sure the board has everything on record. The police reports, the videos, the forged document. And we go to the press," Mary added. "Not a scandal piece, just facts. Timeline, evidence, quotes. If Karen wants to play public opinion, then let's see how she likes it when the truth gets louder than her fiction." We agreed to coordinate the full release of evidence to the HOA board, submit a request to the DA for fraud investigation regarding the forged document, and deliver a calm, fact-based open letter to the neighborhood, signed by multiple neighbors and co-signed by Raymond as a former judge. We didn't want revenge. We wanted finality. Karen could spin all the stories she liked, but facts had a way of digging in, and this time we weren't going to let her rewrite history. The next few days felt like walking through a low-grade earthquake. Nothing dramatic on the surface, but the ground beneath us kept shifting. Word of Karen's community forum spread fast, and not just through flyers. She had started making rounds herself, knocking on doors, peddling her narrative like a traveling preacher of paranoia. According to her, the birthday party had nearly caused a breakdown in neighborhood safety, and I was a repeat offender with a vendetta against the HOA. "She's rewriting everything," Mary muttered, scrolling through the neighborhood message board on her phone. "She says you were the one who violated the restraining order." "She what?" "She's telling people you approached her and provoked her into reacting so she'd violate it." I stared at her. "We have 7 videos." "I know, she knows. But people talk. She's banking on confusion." I didn't realize how effective it was until I ran into one of the newer residents, Jeff, moved in 6 months ago. We'd barely spoken before, but when I passed him walking his dog, he gave me a quick nod and then crossed the street. Subtle, but it hit harder than I expected. Raymond dropped by later that day. He brought a manila folder with him and laid it out on our dining table. Inside were copies of formal complaints from 4 different residents, people I knew, liked, even barbecued with last summer. None of them accused me of anything outright, but they'd all expressed concern about public disruption, hostile community tone, and unclear legal issues with my property. "She's sowing fog," Raymond said. Throw enough shade on someone and even friends start squinting. Mary was already typing. "We're sending our evidence packet to the HOA board in the morning. Timeline, documentation, videos, and the forged policy." "Still want to speak at the forum?" I asked. Raymond nodded. "More than ever. But don't expect her to play fair. If she sees she's losing the vote, she might try something uglier." And she did. That night, around 10:30, I heard a scraping sound outside, subtle at first, then a dull clunk. I stepped out with a flashlight, barefoot, and still in sweats. It took a second to spot it. Someone had dumped 2 bags of garbage over our backyard fence. Food scraps, fast food wrappers, and what looked like cat litter. It wasn't random. It was placed right near where the bounce house had stood. I checked the security footage. Blurry figure, hood up. But the walk. It was familiar. I sent the footage to Phelps. "Not enough for an arrest," he replied, "but I'll note the incident." Patterns forming. Mary stood at the kitchen counter, arms folded. She's unraveling. Or escalating. "Same thing," she said. We were heading toward the vote, and she knew it. The day of the community forum arrived gray and overcast, like the sky was undecided whether it should rain or just sulk. Mary and I arrived 15 minutes early to the HOA's multi-purpose room, a beige-walled space that usually hosted CPR workshops and potlucks. Tonight, the chairs were arranged like a courtroom, with a folding table set up front for the board. Karen stood behind it, flanked by 2 board members who looked like they regretted their life choices. She wore a navy blue pantsuit, a flag pin, and the tightest smile I'd ever seen. As we entered, her eyes met mine, and narrowed. The room buzzed with hushed voices and sidelong glances. Maybe 30 residents had shown up, enough for a show of hands to matter. Raymond arrived with a leather folder and a neutral expression, then took a seat directly across from Karen. When she saw him, her jaw clenched. I followed and sat beside him. Mary remained standing, her arms crossed and eyes cold. "Let's begin," Karen announced, tapping a gavel she clearly brought from home. "Tonight we're addressing serious behavioral violations, endangerment of community peace, and a pattern of non-compliance from certain property owners." The board member to her right coughed gently. "We'll also hear counterstatements and review submitted evidence before any votes are considered." Karen launched into her speech, long, rambling, and full of veiled accusations. She mentioned unauthorized mass gatherings, hostile behavior toward board authorities, and a campaign of legal intimidation. She never used my name, but she didn't need to. She painted a picture with broad, ugly strokes, and then she passed out copies of her evidence. Grainy photos, half-cut screenshots of the party, and a memo titled Emergency Amendment to Gathering Policy, bearing her forged signature block. Raymond stood. "I'd like to address that document first," he said, "because I reviewed the HOA's internal records. That memo never passed a vote. In fact, it was never presented, and I have a notarized statement from 2 board members confirming that. He handed out his packet, which also included the real meeting logs, court rulings, and the full restraining order. The atmosphere in the room shifted. Karen's smirk faded. Mary stepped forward. We're also submitting police reports, video footage, and sworn statements from 7 parents who witnessed Mrs. Dalton's actions during my son's birthday party, including physical destruction of property and aggressive behavior toward minors. A beat of silence. Karen rose from her chair like a pot about to boil over. "This is a coordinated smear campaign," she shrieked. "You people are blind. He tricked you all with his fake charm and fake legalese." Someone in the back muttered, "Didn't she throw a cake?" Karen snapped. "You weren't there. They've poisoned this whole neighborhood." The board president finally spoke. "Karen, enough." Her voice faltered. "I am the HOA president." "No longer," Raymond said. "You've violated ethics, forged documents, and abused your authority. We're calling an emergency board vote. Now." They did. 6-1. Karen was officially removed, pending legal review. She stood there for a second, stunned, then knocked over her chair and stormed out of the room. No one followed her. The courtroom was quiet, but not sterile. It had the kind of hum you only hear when a lot of people are pretending to be calm. Ben sat between Mary and me in the 3rd row, dressed in a little button-up shirt he hated. Raymond was there too, behind us, leaning forward on his cane like he wanted to strike something with it. Karen sat on the other side of the room, flanked by her attorney, an older man who looked like he hadn't won a case in a decade. She didn't look like herself. The perfect hair was fraying. The navy suit had been replaced with something loose and wrinkled. Her eyes darted constantly, as if expecting someone to jump out and exonerate her. No one would. The prosecution laid it out methodically. The restraining order, the video of her crossing the 30-yard line, the footage of her kicking the air pump, flinging the cake, yelling at children. Then came the forged HOA memo, presented with metadata logs showing it had been created on her home computer the day before the party, after she'd already begun her smear campaign. Mary submitted the compiled complaints from residents, the photos of trash dumped over our fence, and even the inspector's statement about the coordinated, anonymous reports. Every time the judge looked down at a new piece of evidence, Karen squirmed a little more. And then came the moment. The judge turned to Karen. "Do you dispute that this document was forged?" She stood, visibly shaking. I didn't intend for it to be used officially. It was a draft. A draft that you distributed to board members and presented to police as binding policy." Silence. The verdict came quicker than I expected. Guilty on all counts. Violation of a court order, criminal mischief, falsification of official documents, endangering minors, intentional harassment, abuse of position in a registered homeowners association. The sentence: 4 years in state prison without parole, a $75,000 restitution payment, and a permanent ban on holding any position in any HOA in Colorado. Karen collapsed into her seat like someone had cut her strings. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Mary gave a short, composed statement. This was never about a birthday party. This was about abuse of power. And today, the system did its job. Ben tugged my sleeve. "Does that mean she can't come back?" I smiled. "No, bud, she won't be back." In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood felt different, lighter. The HOA underwent a full audit. A third-party administrator was appointed. Rules were reviewed, simplified, and, most importantly, made public. No more secret memos, no more surprise finds. 3 months later, we hosted another party. Same backyard, same inflatable T-Rex, same playlist. But this time, the whole block came, even people who used to avoid us. We grilled hot dogs, kids ran wild, and someone brought a bubble machine that went haywire in the best way. At sunset, Raymond stood next to me, holding a paper plate of ribs. And quite the turnaround. "I think we earned it," I said. Near the fence, a new sign stood where the ruined cake once landed. Bronze, small but clear. "Family isn't a violation. Joy isn't a crime." Ben read it aloud to one of his friends, beaming. And for the first time in months, I wasn't looking over my shoulder.